Hey guys, it's Manga here, the creator of Apple Black. Volume 1 is available on Amazon, and I'll leave links in the description or the About section below for you guys to check that out. I'd like to thank everybody who's purchased it already and anyone who's supported me in any way. For the most of this video, as the title suggests, I'm going to be talking about, chapters in volumes, and which is cool because I will be starting chapter 10 of Apple Black really soon, or by the end of the month it should be done. At least that's the goal. So for this video, visually, just to make things visually interesting, I will be doing a character design, and y'all can check it out. It will be an actual character that is in the book, so that'll be fun to look at. So recently I got a question from a friend of mine, asking, my opinion. So basically this video will be my opinion. Obviously I'm a writer and illustrator, but at the same time I'm still developing my skills on all fronts. So this, it could be subjective, but it's my opinion based off of my experience writing and drawing and making comics, Apple Black. So the question was about when to end chapters in your story, and I think that kind of transitions into what a chapter, at least in my mind, what a chapter should be. And I think of chapter almost like watching an episode of a TV show. Chapter is not necessarily a one shot, but to some degree I believe it should stand on its own and progress the story. Now, I think of a chapter as its own thing. It's almost like watching a TV show, and the whole story, the whole series might be interesting, but the actual chapter something needs to happen to push the story forward. You're watching a TV show, each episode needs to be interesting to keep the reader in order to convey the whole plot, whatever happens in the story. Just keep things interesting, and keep things interesting until you hit them with the climax, or peak moment of the story. However you want to tell a story, there's so many ways. That's like a whole nother thing entirely, and there are several ways to go about it. One thing I would suggest to people would be to actually do your research, and there are a lot of articles and even videos of people giving their own input, and you can take little nitpicks, take little things from here and there, and basically learn from others, even some professionals that are online. Now, when I make chapters, they're, like I said, not necessarily one-shots. And one-shots, they're like standalone stories. So they're not necessarily standalone stories, but to a degree, I like to make them feel as if they are. In case, imagine if someone reads that chapter for the first time or watches that episode for the first time. You don't want to have them completely lost, so they can get into the story quick, and if they get really interested, they would want to go back to the beginning to fully understand. If they become a fan, they can go back and fully understand what's going on. But at the same time, you want people to be able to read that chapter or watch that episode and still be interested, still be entertained. So I feel that chapters should be a little bit, unless if you're one shot, you should definitely stand alone, or at least show potential. But the chapter should, to a degree, seem like it can stand alone or stand alone. There's some cases where it completely stands alone. If you watch sitcoms, say Friends, How I Met Your Mother, The New Girl, something like How I Met Your Mother, the whole show was about finding the mother, but there were many stories here and there, relationship issues and stuff like that. And How I Met Your Mother can have a really random episode where maybe that whole episode was about catching a goat, and everybody from the bar, that episode will be about catching the goat, and the episode will probably end with them catching the goat or the goat catching them. Boom, the end. sitcoms like that, or shows like Gintama. If we want to stick into this anime manga realm, Gintama, crazy to me, in my opinion, one of the funniest. In my opinion, the funniest anime that I've ever watched. Y'all can leave your opinions on that, and if you haven't checked it out, go check it out. But it has some serious moments, some serious arcs, but every now and then it has some really silly episodes that are still hilarious. I think like episode 25 was literally about them fighting over food, and I can't remember what happened at the end of the episode. Whether, I don't know, somebody else took the food or the food sport. I can't remember exactly what happened, but that episode was about food, and the story for that episode was centered around food. Now, I'm not saying that your story should have random episodes, or your story should have because something like food is kind of like it's still connected to the story in the sense that it's a funny comedy anime. Shonen, it still has action comedy anime, but it has its random moments here and every now and then, and not just Gintama. There are a lot of shows that do that. And I'm not saying you should be random and completely go away from the story, like like the food episode, but the food episode works because it's consistent to the kind of story, the tone of the show. The show is kind of a light comedy show. Occasionally it gets heavy and dark and even bloody, but it's consistent. But I'm just using it as an example to explain what I mean when a chapter can stand alone. So I'm not saying you should necessarily go that route. It may not be for you, and sometimes it shouldn't. So yeah, I'm just giving it another example I can think of would be shows like Smallville. Back in the day, a season, there's usually like Lex Luthor is the main villain of Superman in general. But sometimes they might have a season where there is like one main villain. They do this in Dexter as well. Dexter would have one main villain for the season, but there will be some episodes where there'll be its own villain going on, and it may tie into the main villain of the season, but an episode may have one thing that's going on that is usually solved in that episode, or at least maybe they do a little to be continued, or he escapes. Basically be interesting and progresses the story. Smallville may have one villain for that particular episode, and it'll tie into the whole Smallville story. Maybe the villain got his powers with the meteor shower, and obviously I'm talking to people that kind of watch Smallville. If you didn't watch Smallville, you probably don't understand what I'm talking about. But when Superman comes to Earth and there's a lot of meteor showers, and according to Smallville, some of the meteor showers kind of give people powers, so most of the people that get the powers are villains. So for that episode, they'll introduce a villain, and most likely at the end of the episode, they'll defeat the villain. But the whole Smallville story has its own major plot that Lex is involved and all that, and each episode kind of pushes that story and progresses that story, and at the same time deals with another story with this new villain. Flash, the new Flash series also does it with, I've forgotten what they call it, but people have powers now. Funny enough, everybody's a villain. Sometimes it comes down to execution, and when you have to be careful and not be predictable in a way. But I'm just trying to kind of give an example of what I mean by having a chapter or an episode have its own thing, whatever that may be, but at least something, and then it has to progress the story. I think chapters should, like I said, stand alone to a degree and have potential, be satisfying to watch. Like after reading that chapter, you feel like, okay, there is new information, and then be just interesting. Some chapters may end with cliffhangers, some may end with twists, just to keep the reader coming back, or flat out to be continues and things like that. And that's how I feel chapters should be. So when you want to end a chapter, it should be when that mini plot is finished, or or something, and when it's finished could be again, it's up to you. There's so many ways to do it. Whether, like Smallville, maybe the mini villain is defeated, or maybe something new information is revealed, like a twist, or as a cliffhanger, or there's so many ways to end the chapter. But one thing to keep in mind ending the chapter that I do is I try to end it in a way, if it's a big series, not a one shot, but if it's like like a big series with a lot of chapters, I try to end it in a way that kind of keeps the reader interested and leaves them wanting more. Even though I know that sounds kind of cliche, but that's the mindset that I go in with when I'm writing my chapters or writing my story. So it may end with a cliffhanger or a twist, or something that is a mini story within the whole plot is completed, and that could be anything. It could be a story about ninjas, and say two clans hate each other, but one episode could just be about one guy getting from destination A to destination B, and maybe something happens in between, but that's like the mini story right there, the journey, the travel. You know what I mean? So one thing you don't want to do is have a chapter where nothing happens. So say the ninja is walking in the woods in chapter 1, and in chapter 2 he's still walking in the woods. You don't want to be boring. You don't want to have nothing happen. Some people, and I used to make this mistake too as well. I used to make this mistake as well, where we're thinking. So when we're coming up with a story and coming up with so many cool ideas, and we're thinking ahead and not thinking in the now. We're thinking, seeing the future, and we can't wait to get to that point in the story. So we keep jumping there, and it only means that maybe. And it may not, that part where that gets you all excited may not even be that interesting, but we're thinking about that part, and even if it is, most likely the journey to get to that part of the story is not well thought out, and it will probably be come off flat. So that's something to think about. So basically, the moral of the story would be to make sure your chapters are stand alone to a degree. And this is just my opinion. Stand alone to a degree, have potential, that is, to show that there is, kind of leave the reader at a spot where their imagination can run wild, and they can see a lot of things happen. There's a lot of potential in the story. There's a lot of things that can take place. A lot of angles can be thrown in the story. Be satisfying to the point where if after reading that chapter they feel entertained, they feel like, yes, that was a good chapter, and be interesting. Let the ride be interesting. I would like to leave it to you guys now. If other things, how do you guys feel about chapters and how to end them, and stuff like that, and your take on what chapters should be? I'll be interested. I'll be looking in the comments to see what you guys come up with, and I'll be making more videos like this. I think some people find it interesting, maybe new videos about first chapters, last chapters maybe. But yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments, and everyone can learn from each other. And that's my take on chapters. The chapter must find a way to be strong on its own. This is White Manga, and I'm out.